Frames. Why are they so different? Or are they? Why am I buying one brand over another? It's because of the frame. That's what really identifies a bike line. The frame. We'll go into details after this and feature this Klein Quantum Race. Smoking hot after this.
Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles.
Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging out with the guy. Hi, I'm Justin, the guy. Obviously, I have a garage shop. Taking scary how to use bikes one bike at a time.
If you like these videos, please like and subscribe.
Hey, welcome back to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging out with the guy. Hi, I'm Justin, the guy. Working on this old bike. Hey, tearing this thing down and I got an epiphany like, well, I haven't really talked about frames and why are they different between different brands? Well, the long answer short is basically all the manufacturer is responsible, or let's say is credited to, is the frame and the frame geometry. Even though they may be made in the same facility overseas, you have a little corner over here, it might be Trek, got a little corner over here, it might be Specialized, and got a little corner over here, it's like Canada, and then you got Giant. Well, what do they all do? I mean, are they just smashing them all together and painting their different logos on them and call it good? You would think some do. I mean, Motorola now, not Motorola, sorry, Motobacon used to be its own particular brand, and then the naming rights got purchased way back when, and basically the Motobacon and the Fujis that you see of today are the same frame. They are painted. So I believe they're under the same umbrella of company. Not really sure though. But back in the 90s, when Trek acquired Klein, Le Mans, Bontrager, and Gary Fisher, you'd think that like, oh, they'd be all the same entry-level frames from each one, just painted differently. But no, they did it very differently. So yes, manufacturers make a lot of their frames in a lot of the same facilities in Taiwan or China and over in Europe as well. They have a collaboration company makes the frames for them. Then the specs, like the components and all that, usually there's Shimano, SRAM, sometimes Campanoli is still in the mix. And then you'll have that piece together with wheels. Sometimes those are branded, like Bontrager will put that on their particular bikes, and it's that kind of thing. They just piece it together. But all those parts are bought in several places. So a lot of times you'll have a Specialized, Trek, Giant, Canada. They'll all have all the same like Shimano 105 components here, old Tegra. And what distinguishes between all four of those brands is the frame. Well, that's the central part of the bike, right? I mean, you got to have a frame to have a bike. Well, that's one. Second is actual fit. They all going to fit and ride. They fit a little differently and they ride a little differently as well. So there's going to be those particular characteristics between those particular brands. For a beginner or entry-level rider, it's really going to be hard to tell between the difference and even know what you like or dislike in particular ride. So really it's just kind of picking a brand that actually fits you the best is the fit part, and the ride portion will come down the line. Doing this myself, I've been very fortunate to be able to ride several different models, because when you're working in a bike shop, you're kind of pigeonholed to that particular brand or Kool-Aid that you'll be drinking, like Trek or Specialized or Canada or whatever, because you only have one or two main brands that will have, and you pretty much ride those. Well, what I do is I refurbish road bikes, and I'm not brand specific. Therefore, I pick good brands and I could pick good bikes to work on. And fortunately, I've had a chance to ride several different models and types of bikes and brands that I haven't ridden before, like a Titanium or a Serrata or a Canadel, or none of those. I've actually worked in any shops that had them, and this gives me an opportunity to actually take them on a road and give them a good ride and see how they feel and fit and that kind of thing. It's kind of fun, So like every 3 months, I rotate a bike, and it's pretty great. I am currently riding on a Quantum Race Q Race, which is the carbon tail, and that's just hidden over in the corner there. That's my go-to for this summer. I might keep it. It's just nice. But anyway, it fits me too. But everybody individually has different body types, so different frames will fit those different particular body types. So going back to the frame, Well, companies put a lot into their frames because that's what distinguishes between each one of them. And luckily for back then, Klein was acquired by Trek, and Trek at the time was bonding all their components or bonding all their frames together at that particular time. And when Klein came on the scene, they actually started welding, and those were being built in Waterloo, Wisconsin, up north from here. So yeah, even though this was made in the same factory, the frame itself was completely used different tubing and different little tidbits of technology. So I wanted to dive into this specific frame as an intel of what's going on, what makes this frame unique to the other ones in its time period. So they started back this over 25, 30 years ago. So, it's one of those things where it's evolved over time. So I'm going to take a couple real close bullet points on this guy. Starting with, I was taking the bottom bracket out and I was like, whoa, I forgot all about this feature. The feature I'm referring to is the bottom bracket shell. And this is the portion here, it's called the shell. And what I've noticed when I took the bottom bracket out, because the bottom bracket was toast, as these threads are actually above the cylinder portion in the internal tube. So what they did is they drew this like double butted, and the butting's on the outside, and that's where they were able to tap and thread it to remove more material in the middle to make it that much more lighter weight. And from there, if you notice, the chain stays are squared to taper. Well, what that is done is with the granular tube process, you'll see like a little sticker here that's granular tube, made in Chehalis, Washington. It used to be in a granular tube. But anyway, what that was is a higher grade of aluminum and mixed alloys that Gary Klein perfected in MIT back in I believe in the early 80s or late 70s. So going to another feature I mentioned before in another video is this rear entry dropout. Instead of the wheel dropping out this direction, it's going this direction. The idea is to be able to put all the force into the actual frame, and there's no chance of it for slippage. So that really secures that rear wheel and hub to push that energy right into the actual frame. So you got high tech here, high tech in the chain stays. And the reason why they're square to taper, this gives the stiffness this direction. So when you crank, all that energy goes into your rear wheel. In addition to that, rear wheel is being forced into the actual frame, and boom, that's accelerating the bike forward. And the tubing here is shaped, it's really hard to tell, but it is tapered like, double butted, but like external double butted kind of thing. Thinner here, wider span. It's probably thinner tubing in this portion and thickens up by the weld. And if you notice the welds, these are like not high bead welds. They're like more of a liquid when they're put on there, which gives you a better contact surface. And here's a little gold nugget about secrets about bike frames. The less experienced welder does the bottom bracket area. Reason being, they call it the C welder, or back then they called it the C welder, because that particular area was not noticeable as a seam very well. And then you'd have like the B welders would do the bigger main areas, and also the dropouts and that kind of thing. And the A welders would do the welds that everybody would see. So that's where you have a higher grade of weld. And also the granular tube, they actually drew this out so it's more of an oval, kind of squished down this way a little bit. Actually, that gives you a stiffness laterally, but actually it's supposed to give you a little more of a vertical plane flex, a little bit to it. And going to the down tube, you're looking at the higher grade weld here. Internal cable routing for both the shifters and the brake, which is really cool. But you got to be really careful switching these out, because that cable drops inside there. You'll have a horrible time fishing that out, especially on the brake one. Because looking at the brake side, it has a gusset in there where you would have to pop that out to get the cable to come back out. So you don't drop this in there. Use a sleeve in there first to replace that cable. So looking at all those little tech bits, and yeah, this frame's had a little bit of scratches and so forth, and I'm going to buff it out as best I can to get the Klein paint job to pop. But also, one little last tidbit on the frame itself is the frame in here internally, it's going to be tapered out as well. So it's going to be beefed up on the ends and skinnier in the middle tube there. With all those little designs and attention to details to all the tubing, what you're looking at here is also a fantastic paint job. The white decaling is painted on first, in addition to, then it's stenciled. Then you have the actual two-tone paint job, which is a blue to dark blue. And in the sun, this is going to really pop after I do the polish work on it. And after they've actually painted those two colors with a nice high glitter content in there, then they pull the stencil off, which exposed the white. And you actually can feel the indentation of the decaling. And then they do a super thick clear coat. And I just did it on the name of the model and the name of the bike. They also did it on the chainstays, which was really cool. And attention to detail, they also did the head badge, which is not a head badge itself, it's just a decal painted on there. In addition to, they did the Icon air rail as well as the Klein on the fork, which is painted on there. So these are not stickers at all. They were stenciled out and painted over. So all those little things, attention to detail. So that just tells you all the things they did to the frame as a selling point back in the 90s when we were 2000s selling this particular bike. Then you talked about the geometry, and you had like 54 centimeters to here, and about 55 across, a little bit longer top in the top tube. That will determine a different ride. So they actually started doing the kind of like the compact frame before the compact frame became a thing. So there you go. That's the frame itself, and fork. So what makes a frame? What makes the actual manufacturer? Well, what makes the manufacturer is the frame and fork, right? The brand. So that in mind, that kind of concludes my ins and outs of a particular frame and all the details. And they still do that today, actually. They all have those geometry kind of angles, strengthenings, all those little technical tidbits. So when you grab that bike and you get on it, there's a lot of thought in every tube and how it's put together and how it's made to make that ride the ride of that particular brand. Either it's a Specialized, a Trek, a Giant, a Cannondale. Yeah, and to be honest, there's still a little bit of technologies from each other and you get kind of a carryover between the others, but the actual frame geometries are a little different between the different brands, which actually will give you a different ride. So anywho, that concludes the frame. Thank you very much for hanging out with me, and until next time, from the garage.